Hello, I'm Rafael, and I had a great question from Spain about Sanshin breathing. Now, the question is, does it shorten lifespan? What I first did when I did this is I actually looked at why someone would say that. And the only reason I found that people said that is because Miyagi-sensei, the founder of Goju-Ryu, passed away at 65. What I did find out is that for his time period, 65 was about where half the working adults would live to. By the way, that's why they made retirement 70 at that time. You don't have to pay him. So he actually didn't live as short a period as people want to assume. And you got to remember, life expectancy back then was about 44. Again, if you're a working adult, maybe they were expecting you to go to 65. Right now, it's 78 for men. So you can see how things have actually changed. The other thing that I actually looked at is his history. Now, he lived a sad life. I mean, he did a lot of work, he did a lot of good, but when you start looking at his age, when he was around 1888 to 1953, we're talking about wars with China, we're talking about wars with Russia, we're talking about the First World War, we're talking about the Battle of Okinawa in World War II. The Battle of Okinawa, he lost 3 of his children, according to some literature, and his father. He also lost one of his students, Shinsato, which, from what some people said, he was his favorite. But you see a sad life, especially the last 7 years. And so to say, oh, well, it's Sanshin, doesn't make that much sense. Now, a lot of people have heard that, and there's a quote about common sense, Thomas Paine said, where it says, common sense is a lot of times wrong. People believe something because they've heard it over and over again, and that's not correct. It's just they just heard it somewhere. So what I ended up doing is first thing I did is I looked at Sanshin, and I started seeing certain patterns. It looked like, to me, like some respiratory therapy type exercises, and so I called a friend who was a respiratory therapist. Always go to someone who knows more about the subject than you. And what he said is, because I showed him 3 different videos, and she said that all 3 showed examples of exercises used in respiratory therapy for people with asthma and beginnings of COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And what they found is that these exercises help increase lung function. So pretty much what I first found out is a lot of the Sanshin actually helps your breathing. Now, when I found that out, I thought to myself, look, I may not know the Sanshin kata, but I can actually include the Sanshin type breathing into one of the katas. As I do a version of Shorin-ryu, which uses Fugata ni, I'm probably going to use that kata. But, again, there was a lot of other things I found, and I tried to find any possible link to a shortness of life and Sanshin. And these were pretty much my results that I'm telling you as I show you the models. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. The question today refers to breathing done in a Goju-Ryu and Uchi-Ryu exercises in Sanshin, where what you notice is they breathe in and breathe out, tensing the abdomen and all the abdominal muscles. It actually is a forced respiration exercise, and it does have a lot of different things to it. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what the question really was asking, and is there any evidence that this is harmful to you? Now, there are certain studies that talk about increasing abdominal pressure long-term can end up causing changes in circulation of the brain, but those are usually long-term and under anesthetized conditions, which really don't make sense when you're dealing with this type of exercise. The reason most people talk about these Sanshin breathing being bad for your health has to do with the age that Miyagi-sensei passed away. If you look, he was born in 1888. Now, he was around 65 when he passed away. And when you look at the life expectancy of when he was born, 88 to now, one of the things you notice is the life expectancy was, the average person would reach about 42. Now, a lot of people died in childbirth. You still are talking about people not living to normal life expectancy now. Today, in 2015, life expectancy for men is 78, 79, depending on what figures you use. So we're talking about, yes, he didn't live as long as a normal male today, but in the time period back then, it really was above average life expectancy. Now, the other thing we have to also realize is he outlived World War II. And one of the things that we notice when you look at people who were in karate and when they died, you have a lot of death in 1945, during the war and right after the war. You're dealing with people who actually dealt with starvation, who dealt with major depressions. If you look at the island after World War II, you see how it's destroyed. Another thing, which was in a lot of articles about Miyagi, it talks about how the person he probably would have wanted to be his successor died in World War II. Now, anyone who has a school knows how close you become to your students. Now, imagine if your most senior student, the one who you were giving your school to, passed away. That depression does that level of depression would decrease life expectancy, which, like you said, if you look at the charts of everyone who died in 1945 after the war, it's extremely high. Now, I am going to talk about the anatomy, and let the psychologist deal with psychology, of the abdominal cavity, because when you're breathing, you have normal respiration, which is in the lungs, and you have forced respiration, which is sternocleidomastoid, which is this muscle here you can see here, the scalenes, even the serratus anterior to it. That would help you breathe in. So, as you breathe in, all these muscles would tension up. When you breathe out, you're talking about your rectus abdominis, your external obliques, your internal obliques on this side going the other route, and your transverse abdominis, which is inside. Now I'm going to open this up and show you what's in here. So, there we go. What we see is the lungs. Now, like I said, when you normally breathe, your diaphragm contracts, which brings it down, and it relaxes and comes back up due to the recoil of the lungs. And that just allows air in and out. Now, in the Sanshin breathing, you actually take a deep, usually it seems that they take a lot higher breath than normal. So you'll see the diaphragm come out, sometimes you'll see the abdominal come out, and you'll see the muscles of forced inspiration here bulge up. So they're going to increase the amount of air going to the lungs, and so the circulation, the oxygen would increase. Now, when they come out with the other thing, they breathe out, and what you'll notice is the tension of the abdominal, the internal and external obliques, and the transverse abdominis. All of them are putting pressure here. Now, if the person were breathing in and breathing out audibly, there shouldn't be much of a pressure. There shouldn't be too much. There will be a little increased abdominal pressure, but it shouldn't be dramatic. If, on the other hand, they're not breathing out, meaning they're breathing in, tightening everything, and not letting it out, they're going to increase their abdominal pressure. And what can happen in that case, which is not the Sanshin breathing, as far as I can see, we can see that there's a hole that goes from the abdominal cavity to the legs. So there would actually be a canal where this artery goes through, called the inguinal canal. Now, if you're increasing abdominal pressure and you don't and you're not letting it out somewhere, you could potentially force intestines out there, which would be a problem. But again, in Sanshin breathing, you notice that they breathe in and out. Advantage of this, I can't find any real disadvantage. There are some studies, if you increase abdominal pressure too much for long term, you get some bad effects. But what I did find is a lot of benefits. One of which is it forces people to move as they breathe. So you don't have people holding their breath. So they're breathing in, out, as they tense. Now, one of the things we did find is with this type of breathing, it does cause muscles and nerves to react faster. There's a couple articles on that, which if you're interested, email me and I'll find them and send them to you. So by doing this, you're actually increasing the speed of reaction that you can end up getting, which to me is just fascinating. By the way, I'm not a go-to practitioner, but I can see the benefits. The other thing is you're going to end up getting more oxygen in your lungs and in your blood, which means there's less of a chance of getting tired if you're doing a lot of movements. Now in Sanshin, you do practice tensioning a lot, holding it, but even that, it is using the breathing as force getting you more oxygen. So even if you're standing there tight and doing a lot of exertion, you would have less drops in oxygen than if you weren't using this breathing technique. So the question was, is there anything that shows me that it's harmful? Like I said, the couple studies are usually putting a balloon in here and blowing it up in pigs, keeping it long term and seeing how the changes happen. And what we found is there will be some hormonal changes if this is long term. But overall, most of the effects seem to be beneficial. Again, if you look at the history, you can see why Miyagi-sensei passed away relatively early. I mean, like I said, most people weren't expected to make it to 65 when he was alive. So with that, I hope that makes sense to you guys. And if you can, join the channel, subscribe, and ask any questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. Goodbye.